Artist. I don't mind being the non-essential. Even a child takes its mother for granted. It does not run back to its mother until it is hurt. Nobody first thinks of water when they arrive at an exquisite dinner party until they are choking. I don't mind being the non-essential, knowing you will come looking when things are broken and nothing else works. Art is non-essential until it is not. This is Madhu Raghavendra. I am a poet and curator and founder of Poetry Couture, a free art movement for poetry spaces in India. I'm also into public health and social development as a practitioner, and that's how I make a living. The best thing about being a writer in India is that people still read literature, celebrate literature. There are many cultural festivals, literary festivals that I get invited to and thankfully recognized, and that is one of the most quintessential sentiment of any artist, to be read and in a way celebrated so that he gets to do what he gets to do and use his writing prowess to also point out things that are also in a way aberrations in the society. And I think that's one of the still good parts of being in India, is that it's still democratic and it's free. The worst part about it is there is no worst side, but like any other artist, I would hope that writings and literature would be celebrated more like the pop culture, and that's a hope and prayer in a way. The best thing about India and why I would never probably want to leave India is the diversity, the culture, the east, west, north, south in no way match each other, not only in languages but in cultural practices, in the way of living everyday life. And I think the richness, and there is the indigenous cultures, there is the northeast culture, which is again very different from a mainstream Indian culture. And you have all sorts of geographies, the oceans, the Himalayas. And so I think the richness that probably India brings, and especially in today's time when you have access to the internet across the globe, you're also listening to Bob Dylan and Bhimsen Joshi on the same day, and they are never in any way connected. So that is the most beautiful part of being in India right now. Yeah. The fun part about being a writer and a poet is you get to tell stories through poetry, all sorts of stories, personal, non-personal, political, arboreal, terrestrial, spatial, geographical, insider perspectives, outsider perspectives, voices heard, unheard. And I think also the lovely part about being a poet is the idea of brevity and such an encapsulated thing. And I love that part about the art of poetry and that's how I always try to even do journalistic pieces, but I go back to poetry because I think there's this idea of a small capsule which you can carry forever in your heart, a line, a poem. So I think, and that is very powerful, yeah, and that can stir revolutions, yeah. The public duty of a writer would be to be witness to his time like any other artist, but more importantly, I also believe that a poet should be able to comfort people in times of despair and point out the disorders in times of comfort. And I think this is what I have believed and worked in my thing. And in the past couple of years of the pandemic, I have taken to very much writing comforting words along with ideas of what was going on, but also when artists were rendered non-essential, I thought that was something that has never happened to me before. It has happened, I know it has happened to people like Rumi, that things would go like wildfire across the world in 12 continents. People will be at the same time talking about you, and I mean, across countries. But so, I mean, the idea that people were looking for art, were looking for words, were looking for some sort of comfort in art was very beautiful. And I think I have, in a way, started to document more of people's lives in poetry, and that has changed in a way. And yeah, so. I think the states and the business people, in so-called whatever terms we call it, I think they should support artists, because artists have always needed patrons, and that is how it has worked in historic times. And because they need, artists need leisure, and not for just for entertainment purposes, but as Billy Collins says, somebody needs to look at the squirrel going up the tree or keep account of the clouds, and somebody needs to do that part of the work. And I believe that something that I've loved about the United States is that there is the poet laureate, the concept of having a poet laureate in every state and federal place. And I think some point I will start vouching with the Indian government that they should start having, young poet laureates and poet laureates otherwise in states, because I think that not only brings the visibility of the art itself, but also creates a direct dialogue between the state and the art, which is always somehow thought in a sense of anarchy, that the artist has to be an anarchist. That doesn't have to be. If there is we want to have a dialogue, so let's have a dialogue through the state mechanisms. There are poets in India, like the indigenous, writing in indigenous languages, writing in Hindi, like the poet Vandana Tete, who writes in Mundari language, which is the language in a tribal place in Jharkhand. And these languages need to be heard because they are not usually published by the mainstream anywhere in the world. And the idea that the indigenous people have always, like Vandana Tete says, that the forest is not a resource for them, it's a way of living. But for the mainstream, our kind of mainstream contemporary and cosmopolitan lives, we think of everything as a resource. But when you read indigenous literature from India, from Northeast India, and poets like Vandana Tete, and one of her recent books was Kaviman Janiman, which is a collection, which is an anthology of indigenous poets, woman poets from India, and I recommend that for everyone. So being in Iowa has been fascinating, and whenever I went to my desk, I have found myself missing at my desk. So because I have been very much into the lives, sharing and crossing other people's lives, and especially, as I said, some of my methods are being very anthropological, and so I have been learning a lot about Mauricio Lazansky's work or Grant Wood's work in Iowa, and I have been also interacting with a lot of local artists like Katie Roche, who is a part of the Mission Creek Festival, or visiting Michelle Edwards in her house, who's a author and a children's award-winning children's book writer. So I've been trying to connect, and I hopefully would want to bring out a short collection which is called Lawn Sign Poems from Iowa. And it has been very fascinating to having a first-hand look of people's lives in Iowa. And this being my first time in the US, I think my art has traveled here before me, my poetry has been here before me. So I think what I got to learn is that I hope this is the beginning of a long-standing relationships towards more artistic collaborations, more grants, and I thank the International Writing Program for that, that they made this possible, and they provided me with a platform where I hope to create more artistic collaborations in the future and make a better Indo-US relationship through my work with the American Embassy back in India, American Cultural Centers back in India, and with the IWP.